One of the APTA core values that I got to see firsthand during my PT 837 experiences at Highlands ARH in the acute care setting was altruism. And if you look here at APTA on the website, looking at the definition of altruism, it describes it as this: altruism is the primary regard for or devotion to the interest of patients and clients, thus assuming the responsibility of placing the needs of patients and clients ahead of the physical therapist's or physical therapist assistant's self-interest. I got to see this come to fruition. I got to see this exact thing that they're talking about here about altruism. I got to see that performed every time we went to this patient who had Parkinson's disease and COVID. You know, my CI would never complain. We would always gown up, making sure we maintain contact precautions, gown up, gloves, mask, face wear. She never once complained. And she would always say, we've got to do right by this patient. We've got to put ourselves almost like we're in their shoes. How would you want to be treated if you was in that position? And that made me just truly stop and think, like, what if I really was in that position? What kind of care would I want to be provided to me if I was in that patient's shoes? So that's something that really stuck out to me. I mean, this patient, you could have complained, you could have dreaded it, but she never once showcased that to me at all. Never once displayed that kind of attitude. She was always positive, always trying to put the patient's interest above her own, never looking at it from a negative standpoint and being like, well, we got this patient today. I mean, this patient, every time we stood him, he had that rigidity. He just kind of wanted to lean back and stay in that position. Very difficult to stand. Every time we tried to get him to a bedside commode to turn with the walker, he had that freezing gait. So he just kind of stand there and drool would start going down his mouth. And then to top it all off, to make it even more difficult, the patient couldn't really verbalize and communicate with us. When he tried to talk, it was more of a mumble. Sometimes you can make out what he's saying. So the way she adapted was to ask the patient yes and no questions and just make things more as simplistic as possible for him while still providing him with the best care that we possibly could. It was one that it really required two people to truly treat the patient with optimal care and helping him to get up and walk when he could and try to get him to that bedside commode when he would kind of mumble, he needed to go to the bathroom and you could make out what he was saying. And on top of that, he had COVID. So, I mean, we really just, worked with this patient. She never once complained, always putting his self-interest first, his interest above her own, never once just complaining about it. And that's something that really stood out to me. As far as was this a positive or negative, it was extremely positive. Just to watch her, the way that she acted and reacted, and all the things that she'd done and said to me, and just the way that she displayed and carried herself was really something that stood out to me. And that's the kind of care that I want to provide to all my patients. Always being inclusive to them, always thinking about what if I was in their shoes, putting myself in their perspective, and that's what altruism is all about. And I got to see that firsthand in PT 837.